Hi, friends. Welcome back to Tea with a Taurus. Grab your tea. Today feels like a grounding kind of conversation. So, I recently stepped way outside my comfort zone and joined an existing book club as a new member. And it's a library book club. But before you picture something stuffy and whispery and overly academic, let me just say this. They read spicy romance. So it can't be that serious, right? But we met for a Valentine's potluck, which was such a vibe. Cozy food, cutesy table decorations, and a little bit of chaos in the best of ways. I walked in not knowing anyone, bringing a dish, and my very much social anxiety ridden self. And I left feeling like I had just one of those main character try something new moments. And the book that we discussed was Lights Out. Now, I'm not doing a full review episode today, although if you want one, I can absolutely spill that tea. But there was a theme in the story that stayed with me long after the leftovers were packed up and I drove home. In the novel Lights Out by Nevessa Allen, Josh, our male main character, carries this deep fear that he will become like his father, a famous murderer. That darkness is something he feels might live inside of him too. And Allie, our female main character, in her own way also comes from a complicated family background, tied to crime and morally gray choices. But what stuck with me wasn't the crime aspect, it was the fear of becoming your parent, the fear that what runs in your blood will run your life, the fear that no matter what you do, you might end up repeating a cycle you never asked for. And sitting there at that Valentine's potluck, surrounded by conversation and like minded people, I realized that this is such a universal, very unromantic topic. It's not the kind of topic we would put on greeting cards, but it's real. And I think that's something many of us can relate to, even if our parents weren't criminals. Sometimes the fear is quieter. It sounds like, what if I turn out just like my mom? Or what if I can't escape this cycle? What if it's genetic? What if this is who I am? Now, for me, that fear has always been centered around alcohol. My father is an alcoholic. I have alcoholics on that side of the family. And because of that, I've always stayed away from alcohol almost completely. And not because I judge it or judge people who use it, not because I think it's inherently bad or they are, but because I am deeply afraid of becoming just like him. There's this voice in the back of my mind that says, what if it's hereditary? What if you start and you just can't stop? What if that switch flips? And even though I don't drink, I've noticed something else, those addictive tendencies. Not necessarily to substances, but to behaviors, to productivity, to routines, to scrolling, to overworking, to obsessing over ideas, to hyper-focusing and chasing dopamine. And sometimes I catch myself and wonder, is this me? Or is this inherited? Is this environment? Or is it wiring? And here's the truth that I've had to sit with: we can inherit tendencies, but we are not doomed to repeat patterns. There's a difference. Research does show that addiction can have a genetic component, but genetics are not destiny. They are predispositions, but not prophecies. And I think that's such an important distinction. In our book, Josh spends so much time afraid of what he might become that he almost forgets he has choices, that he has agency, that he can actively decide who he wants to be. And I think sometimes when we grow up in complicated households, whether that's addiction, emotional immaturity, anger issues, silent codependency, we can internalize this belief that we are on a predetermined path. Like it's already written. But here's what I've learned: fear of becoming like your parent is often a sign that you won't. The very awareness, the reflection, the questioning, the internal avoidance, that is already different. I don't know if my father has questioned his drinking, but I question everything. And that's not judgment. That's just observation. And I think something powerful happens when we move from fear to awareness. Instead of saying, I'm scared I'll become this or that, we ask, what parts of this story do I get to rewrite? Because here's the nuance: we might not become our parents in the obvious ways, but sometimes patterns sneak in sideways. Maybe you don't drink, but you overwork. Maybe you don't yell, but you shut down. Maybe you don't repeat the addiction, but you repeat the coping mechanism. And that doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. I've had to look at my own tendencies with a softer lens, not a panicked one. Instead of, oh gosh, I'm becoming just like him, it becomes, okay, I see that tendency. What do I do now? What do I do with it? Because self awareness without compassion turns into self criticism. And that right there is another cycle many of us inherit. There's, there's also something else I want to say, especially if you grew up in a household where you had to be the responsible one. Sometimes the fear isn't just becoming like them, it's resenting them for what they pass down. And that's complicated too. It's okay to acknowledge that you were shaped by things that you didn't choose. But it's also empowering to realize that you're not powerless now. We can't change where we came from, but we can interrupt the pattern. And interruption doesn't have to be dramatic. It can look like going to therapy, setting boundaries, choosing not to drink, learning emotional regulation, pausing before reacting, naming your triggers, and building routines that support you. It can look like steady change. And if you've been here for a while, you know that steady is a word that means a lot to me. Breaking cycles doesn't usually happen in one bold decision. It happens in small, consistent, sometimes even boring choices, like choosing water instead of wine, or choosing rest over chaos, choosing reflection over reaction, choosing awareness over denial, choosing grace over shame. And sometimes those small choices, they're made quietly, like after a book club, after a Valentine's desserts, conversations that stir something deeper than we expected. You leave thinking that you just discussed a dark romance novel, but really, you were sitting with your own story. And here's another truth: you will probably share traits with your parent. Some will be beautiful, and some, they'll just be complicated. You are allowed to keep what serves you and release what doesn't. That's not betrayal, it's growth. I think one of the most freeing realizations is that we are not carbon copies. We are continuations with edits. And edits, those are powerful. If you are afraid of becoming like someone in your family, I would like for you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, what specifically are you afraid of? What behaviors? What patterns? What outcomes? And then ask, what small choices can you make today that moves you in a different direction? We're not looking for a life plan. We're not looking for a dramatic overhaul. Just something that can be done today. Because cycles don't break overnight. They can loosen and they can soften and they can get interrupted. And sometimes the fact that you're even having a conversation like this or listening to this is proof that you're already changing the story. If you struggle with addiction in your family, whether it's substances, anger, control, silence, or chaos, I just want to say you are not broken because of your bloodline. You are aware, and awareness is powerful. You are allowed to be cautious. You are allowed to be mindful. You are allowed to protect yourself. But you're not required to live in fear of your own shadow. You get to choose who you become. So maybe today, as you sip your tea, reflect on this. What patterns am I consciously choosing not to carry forward? And what beautiful traits am I choosing to amplify instead? Because you are allowed to evolve beyond what you were given. You are allowed to be the steady one, the safe one, the aware one. And that alone already makes you different. Thank you for sitting with me. And thank you to my new book club for unintentionally inspiring this conversation. If you'd like me to dive deeper into the book itself, let me know. I'm always happy to spill a little more tea. Until next time, stay steady, stay reflective, and remember, you are the author of who you're becoming.